Hi, and welcome to Angie's Tasty Tuesday. I'm Angie, and I'm here every week to bring you a new and delicious whole food plant-based recipe that you can add to your family's weekly menu. Today is something that I've been waiting to introduce, and it is a whole wheat bagel with savory toppings. Now, these do have a lot of steps. None of them are complicated, very few ingredients except for the toppings, but it is a timed out procedure, so you do have to have about an hour and a half to 2 hours of time if you're going to make them from start to finish, which you have to do because you can't really stall the process in any one place and have it come out right. So today, all about bagels. So first off, we need a half a cup of very warm water. Now I just get my spigot running really hot, and my water is pretty hot, and half a cup hot, warm, very warm water with 1.5 tablespoons of maple syrup. And this is what we're going to feed to the yeast. That's what's going to activate our yeast. So we've got that poured in there. I have another glass container, and I have 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. So to that, I'm going to add my very warm water maple syrup mixture. I'm going to stir this together, and then we're going to have to set this to the side. It needs to settle, process for about 15 minutes. And so I'm going to set my kitchen timer for 15 minutes, but in the meantime, we're going to start mixing up the dry ingredients for our dough. While our yeast mixture is activating, I've measured out 500 grams. And whenever you're making bread or bagels or any kind of a recipe that involves kneading or activating yeast that you want to have rise later, it's very important that you weigh out your flour and not just scoop it, because different flours actually have different weights. This is whole wheat pastry flour, 500 grams. To that, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of regular salt. And I'm just going to whisk that together to mix it really well. And when I'm done, I'm going to leave a well in the middle. And what I mean by that is you're going to kind of create like a small little hole in the middle. And when our yeast is activated, that's where we'll pour our water yeast mixture along with our hot water to put in our dough. While our yeast is still activating, we've mixed up our salt and our flour. Now we're going to mix up the topping mixture for our bagels. Here I have 1.5 tablespoons of black sesame seeds, 1.5 tablespoons of white sesame seeds, 2 tablespoons of poppy seeds. I have 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and 1 tablespoon of caraway seeds. Now I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of dried rosemary, which I took and I crushed up, because if you don't, they're little like sticks and they'll stick in your teeth. So 2 teaspoons of crushed up rosemary, but don't turn it to a powder because then it's not as good on the top of your bagel. 2 teaspoons of crushed thyme, 2 teaspoons of dried minced onion, not onion powder, minced onion, and 2 teaspoons of dried minced garlic. And we're going to mix those together and just set them to the side, because this is what we're going to dip our bagels in after we boil them before we bake them to make the topping. Now this resembles an everything bagel seasoning in some ways, but it does have that thyme, and it also has the rosemary in it that you won't find in that, and it is missing the salt. I found when I tried the everything bagel seasoning, the bagels turned out way too salty. And salt is something that we really don't need a lot of extra of, and we already had the salt in the dough, so I did not want salt in my topping. Any of these toppings, if you happen to not like or want to add something different that you like, you can always mix up different seasonings if you want it less savory or more savory. You can leave out the garlic and the onion if you don't want those in there and just do the seeds. You can do just a poppy seed, whatever your preference. But I tend to like all of the different flavors mixed together on the top of my bagel. So we're going to set our seasoning aside, and we'll be right back. And while we're waiting for our yeast to continue to activate, you're going to take out a cookie sheet or flat board, whatever you put in your oven to cook on your cookies in, and we're going to cover it with a piece of parchment paper. You're going to set your oven to either the proofing or the warming setting. because after we get done with this next step, it's going to need to sit in a warm oven or a warm place for 1 hour. So my oven has a warm setting, which is just around 100 degrees, maybe a little less, that I use. You're also going to need a dampened kitchen towel to lay over the top of the bowl. As you can see, our yeast is all activated. It's nice and foamy on the top. Smells so good, just like bread. I've got my bowl with my well in the middle, and I'm going to dump this yeast mixture right here in the middle of that well. Scrape it out really well. And then I have 1 cup, again, of very warm tap water. And I'm going to put about 3/4 of the cup in to start. I'm reserving about 1/4 cup. And then I'm going to mix the dough up until it forms a nice soft dough. So if it's too dry, which I have made this several times, you're going to need to add a little bit more water as you go, but you can never take the water back out. So make sure that you add it a little bit at a time until we get a consistency where the dough is sticking together well, and we know we'll be able to knead it, but it's not an overly wet dough. That's another reason it's good to measure out your flour so that you get to knowing exactly each time you make the recipe how much water you're going to need. And what I do is I continue to scrape down my spoon and just collect it off the sides of the bowl. And I can see there's still quite a bit of dry flour in there. So I'm going to add just a bit more water. I end up using just about the whole cup, if not just a little less. And then I find at the end, it's easier just to get my hands in there and use it to grab all of the little bits of flour and dough until I can collect it all into a ball. Now you can either flour, after this step, flour your countertop, or you can flour a breadboard like I have. And I'm using the whole wheat pastry flour again to flour it. As you can see, all of my little bits are sticking together. It's moist, but it is not overly wet. There's my dough. So I'm going to take just a little bit of my whole wheat pastry flour, and I'm generously flouring my board. And now you're going to knead the dough for 10 minutes. So this counts as your upper body workout for the day. And you can also think about pushing away all your troubles, all your thoughts, and pushing away all of your negative energy into your dough. Just let it come out your body and into the dough. You can even use this 10 minutes to be your mindful moment for today. Think about all of those positive things that you've had happen this week. Just a second, let me set my timer really quick. And use this time just to work out some of your frustrations, or think about all of the things you have in your life to be thankful for. Some of your favorite quotes. One of mine is, I stopped explaining myself to people when I realized they could only understand from their own level of perception. In other words, people can't understand what they've never been through if they haven't seen it or experienced it. They can empathize, but they can't truly always understand, which is okay. We all have our own life experiences. But you're going to keep this process up, kneading your dough. Sometimes you have to add a little bit more flour to the board. If you're using a board like mine, mine is not a seasoned board. It's not finished. And you're going to do this for 10 minutes. So we'll be back when we're done with our kneading. We have our dough all kneaded. You can see it's nice and soft on the outside. You're going to take a non-metal, and it's very important that it's not metal, plastic bowl, and wet the entire inside surface. Next, we're going to take that dough and we're going to roll it around the inside of that bowl just to dampen all the edges. We want it nice and moist and damp. Then I took a kitchen towel and dampened it with hot water. We're going to put that over the top and place it in a warm oven for an hour until it doubles in size. Dough out of the oven, it's risen for an hour. We're going to punch it down, and by that you just take your fist, kind of punch it in there, and it is going to stick a little bit to the bowl, but you can just take your fingers and kind of lift it up. And after we get it punched down, we're gonna set it back over to the side, and it's gonna rest for another 10 minutes with that damp cloth over the top. Okay, now we're gonna take the dough out of the bowl. Scrape all the little bits out with your fingers. We're gonna put it on that parchment lined cookie sheet for just a minute. And we're going to shape it. I shape it into a log. It's easier for me to separate into equal pieces that way. So I make kind of a log out of it. And then I just half it. Half those pieces. Half those pieces. And this will make 8 bagels. So I'm going to take each of those pieces and roughly roll them into a ball. You want to preheat your oven to 425 degrees. And then you also want to take a great big pot, fill it with water, and bring that water to a rolling boil for this next part. So after I'm done making this, I will set that water to boil, and I've got my oven preheating to 425. So once you have the balls, you're going to take a finger, and I've got just a little bit of whole wheat flour here, and you're going to take your finger and make sure it's got nice and floured, and you're going to poke a hole right in the middle of the ball, and then using your thumb and your hand, you're going to form it into the bagel shape. Now you want to make sure, I like to make sure the hole in the middle is about 2 to 3 fingers big, because you don't want the hole to close up once you boil them and bake them. So they're going to be about 1/3 to 1/2 the size that they'll be when they're finished. And you're going to repeat this process with all 8 balls to make the 8 bagels. So after we've shaped our last bagel, we're going to take that same damp tea towel and cover them up, and they're going to rest for another 10 minutes. Our bagels are resting. We're going to take about 1/2 to 3/4 of a teaspoonful of miso paste, and we're going to add about a tablespoon of really, really hot tap water to it, and mix that up. And I just use my little basting brush. And once you get that all blended, it doesn't take but just a second, we're going to add a tablespoon of nut milk. And this is what we're going to use for our wash on top of the bagels after they boil, before we add the toppings. Remember, get your water to a rolling boil while you're waiting. See, our water is at a rolling boil, and it needs to be so that your bagels don't fall apart. So here we have our bagels that have rested for 10 minutes. And what you want to do is take and drop 4 of them at a time in the water, and set your timer for 2 minutes. And at the end of 2 minutes, you're going to flip them and boil the other side for 2 minutes. And you want to give them plenty of space so they don't bump into each other. And then we're going to take them out with a slotted spoon and drain them on a cookie rack over a towel. So it seems like a long time on the video for 2 minutes, but really it goes by pretty quickly when you're doing it. So we'll be right back when we flip them. That was the first 2 minutes. We're going to flip them with our spoon. And now we're going to boil the other side for 2 minutes. After the last 2 minutes is up, you can turn on your last batch. You can turn the heat down, and you're just going to take a slotted spoon and scoop your bagels out onto a cookie sheet. I have a towel under mine so it won't drip on the counter. Otherwise, if you put them straight onto your parchment paper, it tends to get soggy, and nobody likes soggy bagels. All right, so my oven is preheated to 425. I realize it says 475, but my oven is off 50 degrees, so it really is 425. And now we're going to take the bagels, and we're going to get ready to brush the top and coat them with the seasoning. We've got our bagels. We're going to take that miso nut milk mixture, and we're going to brush the top of the bagel. And then we're going to take that seed mixture, and I put some on a paper plate, as you can see, and we're going to roll that bagel in that seed mixture to get it nice and stuck on the top. And that's what it'll look like. We're going to place it on the parchment. Take it, dip it, and roll it in our seasoned toppings. You can see how pretty they look. I like to make sure I dip the rounded side instead of the flat side of the bagel in the seasonings, and try to get a good even coating on there. This wash really does help the seasoning stick, and the miso gives it a little bit of a salt flavoring. That's why you don't need any salt in your seed mixture. I just use a little basting brush. And you'll have lots of the seed mixture left over that you can save for other batches. It's also good toppings if you want to make the multi-seed crackers that have been in the other episode. That's an excellent topping to use for the multi-seed crackers to roll into it. Just make sure you get a nice coating on each bagel. Aren't they? They're just so pretty. They really are delicious as well. They make the house smell so good when they're cooking with all of these different seeds and flavorings on top. This is a savory bagel. I am going to be working on creating a cinnamon raisin bagel, so stay tuned. I'm still experimenting on how to get the swirl to go through the bagel and when is best to add the raisins, but you can watch for that in upcoming episodes. Remember, March is going to be meaningful meetups, and hopefully we will get another little get everybody on our Facebook group and get them interacting and supporting each other. So there we have our 8 bagels ready to go in the oven. They're going to bake for anywhere from 10 to 13, 14 minutes, depending on your oven. When you check them, you're going to lift them up and just make sure the bottom is starting to be a golden brown, and you'll know they're done. After your bagels come out of the oven, you want to cool them on a cooling rack for about 10 minutes if you're going to eat them immediately. And if you don't eat them immediately, you can cool them completely and then make sure you store them in an airtight container. They will dry out just like store-bought bagels will over time if they're not kept in an airtight container. They are awesome to use to dip in soups or stews or chili, or to slice and toast and put guacamole all over, or a whole food plant-based cream cheese. They are delicious just by themselves. I eat them by themselves. But I hope your family enjoys this recipe as much as my family does. We love the new addition of having a different kind of bread option with a meal. And remember, if you like these videos, to give us a thumbs up. Also, if you would take about 5 minutes to do the survey and the link at the bottom of the page, it would really help me know how to plan and how to prepare what upcoming videos you would like to see. Next month, remember, we're going to be doing meaningful meetups. And remember, you can always find more of these videos here or here. And please remember to hit that subscribe button. We're getting so close to 500 subscribers. And until next time, remember, plants are the best medicine.